Hey, my friend, what's up?
Hey, Greg.
It's good to
All
have you.
good?
I was just telling you before we started recording that you're such a papa. So it's good to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Can you tell me a bit about your kids? How many do you
Yeah,
have and how old are
I
they?
have two I have two daughters. Now they are 6 and 7. The oldest one will turn 8 in October, so like 19 months apart between each other. So it's really nice because they are very close to each other and they play a lot together. So that's a good thing of having very close kids. On the other side, it was tough when I was a young dad, but right now everything is getting calmer and nicer.
How did you feel when you got your daughter? I remember, when we were pregnant with our first child, I was convinced. You could tell the story to my wife; she would laugh about it. I was convinced that it was a boy. Like I was sure we would have a boy. I was trying to push for a name for a boy. Like I was sure it would be a boy. And she called me when we got the results from the test, and she was like, "It's a girl." And I was super not disappointed. I was super confused because in my head it was a boy, and I really wanted to have a boy. And of course I'm super happy that it was a girl. She's awesome. But did you have this feeling as well? Like were you somehow hoping to get a boy or?
Yeah, for the first one, not so much, because I would like to have a boy for sure. But the first one, not so much. More on the second one, I was feeling that when I knew that it was a girl on the second one, it was a little bit tougher to digest.
Yeah.
But now, if I look back, I cannot manage having a boy.
Yes. It's often like
It's
that. I'm bringing it up, it's not really like it's a non-topic and it feels a bit weird maybe to some people, but you'd be surprised how many dads have shared in the confidence the same feeling. Like they wanted to have a boy somehow. And for me, I think that it's not really probably one of the reasons I wanted to have a boy is because, and I have one now with my son, but the reason I wanted to have a boy, I think, is probably because I felt like it would be easier. That maybe I would relate a bit better to a boy than a girl. Of course, it turns out that it's not true. Like I can tell, I can share that with people listening for sure. That I'm very very close to my daughter, and I'm so happy that to have a girl. But two girls,
yeah,
uh, it must be also quite the experience.
it is. I think also the boys, it's that you relate, but also I don't have it, so I don't know exactly. I just have some friends that have boys, and I sometimes play with them. But I feel it's also like there's things that you do with the boys that I would like also to do with if I have a son. But
Mm.
on the other side, there are things with the girls that, like you're saying, asking wanted to have two girls, like when
Mm.
they start painting the nails and all this girl stuff. Okay, why? Why so much? But that's part of their the way of being. So it's really nice. It's sometimes it's too much rose in my house,
Okay.
but on the other side, it's such a nice feeling of having the girls, and it's especially because they are two girls. They play together a lot. That's really nice for as a dad to have them playing together and being very close. I think I don't know. I feel that they cannot live without each other, and because they have always been
Mm.
together, or most of the time together, except when they were really young. So if right now they are on vacation in Portugal, they are together. So they are always together, the two of them. So it's
Almost like
really
twins.
good for them. Yeah, it's kind of people sometimes say that they are twins, but
Do they fight
it's
each other?
I think they're starting now a little bit more. Not really fighting, but getting angry with between them. Not a lot, but you can see in terms of personalities, there's one that it's more kind of taking the leadership and the older one. But I think it's also because at school she's more shy. So she takes that or she uses the home in their comfortable environment to show their her leadership or her power kind of with her sister.
Yeah, that's
Sometimes
interesting.
I feel that between the two of them, but they luckily they don't find too much between each other, so that's good.
Can you share where you're based? right now? Where do
Yeah,
you
I'm
live?
based in Switzerland, but I'm originally from Portugal.
And your wife?
That's also my wife. She's also Portuguese, so that's also makes a nice environment here because we speak Portuguese at home, but they are at school in the French part of Switzerland, so they speak French at school. So at home they speak French between them sometimes when they're playing because that's the language that they learn to play. And I need to. That's something that I need to fight with them is to only speak Portuguese at them, and not French.
Do you actually, you said that's something I need to fight them, but do you actually do it? Do you try to
Uh,
enforce the language? Or?
yes, especially the Portuguese. I really try hard to for them to speak Portuguese and try to correct them, and they follow most of the times,
Mhm.
um, because I feel that is important, especially if they go to Portugal that they don't really feel like a foreigner or
Mhm.
like an immigrant, so that they
Mhm.
really also feel that or learn the culture, learn how to speak properly. But
Mhm.
it's very very hard. Uh, my mom is always saying when she's with them, yeah, you need to correct them more often.
Mhm.
Yeah, I cannot correct every single word. So that's challenging as living abroad and being if like dual language uh, environment. It's
Yeah.
challenging, but on the other hand, they get a lot of capacity of speaking to different languages, which is really nice.
This is
The
something I
funny thing is
recognize.
when they just an the funny thing is that when they don't know the Portuguese word, they say it in French with a Portuguese accent. It's like that's the funniest.
Yeah, that's a good one. And this is something I recognize as well. For me, so we live in Sweden. My wife is Swedish. I'm French. So I speak French with my kids. I speak English with my wife, and my wife speaks Swedish with them. But of course, they are in a Swedish environment most of the time. So for my son, it's not really a topic right now because he's 18 months and he's not going to school yet. But for Sophie, my daughter, when she started going to school, of course, Swedish was became like quite a strong language for her, and it was a little bit of a challenge to push her to use French. Like she had a couple of periods where she would talk to her mom instead of talking to me because she wanted to use the Swedish because it was easier. And I don't blame her for that. I think it's quite normal, and it didn't last very long either. But it was very important for us that she could speak French well because, well, first, it's part of her culture. Like, I want her, the same way, exactly what you said. I want her to be able to go to France and feel like at home as well. But the other thing is, I want her to be able to communicate with my parents. I want her to be able to communicate with her cousins and uncle and aunt, and all of that will happen in French, even though they speak English. But you know what I mean. So that's quite interesting, and I think now we're past the difficulty. Like, it was really difficult, I think, when she was 3. Like, yeah, the beginning of
Mhm.
her third year, I think, was quite
Yeah,
a
that's also
challenge.
when they start to develop stronger the language
Yes,
skills.
yes. But
But
now you would listen to her. She speaks French like perfectly. Really, like, she has
that's
like
very
a
good. Yeah.
extended vocabulary. She speaks Swedish very, very well, and she also speaks English now because she's
That's
learned it
awesome.
from just hearing us speak it at home.
In my case, I have my wife speaks French better than I do, and when my kids need to share more emotions that they felt like at school or like at the end of the day, they feel much more comfortable sharing that in French. And my wife accepts it more that they speak French with her than I do. So she kind of listens and speaks in French to them during those times so that they can really put into words what they are feeling. And I think that's also very important for them. But yeah, for me, I don't like because when I speak French with them, they just make fun of me because I have a very Portuguese accent, and they try to correct me and so on. So I really try to avoid that. But that's good that they can also share these feelings with my wife and are open for that, and that's it. That's good because sometimes that's the language that they feel more comfortable with. So that's good that they can also express kind of natively what they feel about it. But you live in a different situation, like in a different environment with many more language, and so it's hard. I totally understand why your daughter was more related to her mom.
Mhm. Yeah. And now it's funny because I try to listen when she plays, and sometimes she plays in English, sometimes she plays in French, sometimes she plays in Swedish, and it's very interesting because if it's sort of like the same game, the same fantasy, it's interesting to hear the small differences. Like, let's say, I'm going to take a completely fictitious example, but let's say someone could be like a doctor when she's playing in Swedish, but then she would be like the patient if she was when she's playing switching to French, which is it's very interesting to see. Sometimes it's because some of the association. I think I'm not a linguist, so I'm not a specialist, but I think that some associations from the words in the language they are connected a little bit loosely when you learn the language. So, for example, doctor and patient, maybe it's part of the same corpus of words in a way. So to her, like it doesn't disrupt the fantasy because it's still part of the same universe in a way.
Yeah,
Again,
yeah.
I'm not a linguist, but that's what I would imagine.
Mm, yeah.
It's quite interesting to see for sure. I like as well what you what you said. I see that as well. My daughter, if she doesn't know a word, especially in English, she will use the Swedish or the French, but make it English. So, for example, she
It's
would add like ing, like ing,
good.
uh,
It's really
which
funny.
it is, and I think it teaches you a lot of things regarding learning and learning languages. Like you learn, for example, you can see that it's interesting. I took a Swedish class in July to improve my Swedish, and a lot of the efforts that were put by the teacher were on the rules. And teaching the rules of the language can be useful in a way, but if I look at my daughter, like rules have nothing to do. Oh, yeah, it's not the rules that are predominant. What's predominant is the patterns. Like she recognizes how, for example, how the English words are constructed, and she tried to emulate that if she doesn't have the correct word. So that's quite an interesting, like looking at a kid, at a child learning a language and learning several languages is very interesting because you realize as well, like, oh, how they make the connection between words, how sometimes they have like a slight difference between like the word in one language and another. Maybe they don't use it exactly the same way. And then also, I think something that was quite freeing for me is to see as well that she doesn't really care about speaking poorly. So for example, when she was, it was especially true with her English, where we put no effort teaching her English. French, I did, and Swedish, we did. But English, we put no effort. She learned from like just absorbing. And one day she started speaking English.
It's
And
insane.
yeah, it is completely insane. But in the beginning, when she was making English sentences, it was always like quite poor English. Like words were wrong, and the word order was wrong. But she didn't care, and that also enabled her to learn. Where I think me, especially as a French, I want to speak the language that I'm learning perfectly before using it. Like I'm a little bit afraid almost to be misunderstood
Judged.
or to
Yeah.
be stupid. Yeah, 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 to be judged. But this is not how you learn. Like I look at my Swedish, I've progressed tremendously when I decided that I would use bad Swedish until I can speak good Swedish. So that's all of that
It's
you learn from like looking at kids.
it's also kind of experimentation and errors, right? You try, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. Then it's okay. Let's let's try again next time, and kind
Yeah.
of iterative learning. But sometimes they say the correct words in Portuguese, but they mean completely different things because they just apply the French word with the
Mm.
Portuguese accent and transformations, like similar to what you're saying, then observing and knowing how things are structured in Portuguese, and that it's completely a different word, that it's valid, but doesn't mean what they wanted to say. So it's really funny.
You
Especially,
also
I think it should be funnier for my my grandma, my mom's and the family in Portugal because it's like we understand it, but they might.
Mm.
What the hell?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's super interesting to see how the language is developing in them. Something I'm struggling a little bit with is to find as well how to correct her language mistakes, because also I want her to feel like she's free to experiment with the language in a way. But at the same time, I want her to be able to speak properly. So that's something I'm always struggling with, trying to find the correct balance.
The balance.
She does the same with me than your daughter does with you, which is that when I speak Swedish, she corrects my Swedish, and and she's ruthless. You know, it's like she doesn't mean bad, but she corrects it like very firmly. And the same way she corrects my wife when my wife speaks French. She corrects my wife if she makes a mistake. And sometimes when I
He has
hear
the
the way
full
she's
power.
yeah, yeah, oh yeah, that's true. She has the full language power. And sometimes I think when I listen to the way she's correcting us on the language, um, like it's a mirror, and I'm wondering, am I being enough like charitable when I'm correcting her with the language, or am I being a bit too strict in a way? Um, so I'm always trying to tell her, you know, like lovingly, especially now. When she was little, I think I wanted her to have the correct basis of the language. Um, but now I think I'm a little bit more cool. But when I hear her correcting us, I'm telling her like, especially if there are other people, we have guests. I told her it's nice if you correct me in the in a
In a
way that
nice way.
doesn't make me feel that doesn't make me feel like I can speak at all.
What I feel, not correcting me the language, now they correct me because I try to not speak French to not have her making fun of me. But they sometimes when I'm speaking on the phone or something like that, they listen. But yet I think what I notice is, especially when they are playing with each other, like miming what they like their teacher at school and the way they speak and like they are direct and very sharp with each other. And I think
Mm.
this mimics what the way the teacher behaves at school. And when I'm starting seeing that, well, are really teacher that harsh with them, or is also they are exaggerating a little bit? That's where I notice more this mimic part.
There is probably a bit of both, and I think when it comes to language, we have like our human brain is calibrated to single out the things that are maybe a little bit harsher or a little bit stronger, or so for a kid it's easier to just like string all of them together,
Yeah,
and it gives you the feeling of like, wow, that's a lot. Maybe it's harsh, but maybe it was just like one comment here and there,
yeah,
like
no,
with like the rest that were like more normal kind of conversation. So it's something that we put as a rule as well in our house, is that my daughter needs to speak to my son in French. So this is something that we established right away, like when he was born. Because when he was born, we were like you probably did the same, but as soon as my daughter was born, I was talking to her like normally. Like we never
yeah,
used like baby talk.
yeah,
Like right
me
away, we
neither.
were just like, and we knew that like my daughter would try to speak to my son right away as well. So we told her from the start. We said, we need your help. And that's how we told her. We told her we need your help. You're gonna help us to teach him French, because he's not gonna learn at school. So would you agree to just like speak to him in French? And that's what she's been doing. She speaks to him in French like 99% of the time. The exception being
Nice.
maybe if she's like pretending to read a book to him or something. But otherwise they play in French. She talked to him in French, and he can't speak yet. Of course, he's 18 months, but he says a few words, and he says a few words both in Swedish and in French.
Well,
So, for example,
this is
he says "hej då," which means bye in Swedish. But this morning, for example, when he woke up, he told me "veux boire," want drink. So that's quite interesting, and also it's interesting to see that he uses the correct language depending to whom he's talking to. So French with me, and Swedish with my wife. Though my wife is speaking French to him as well. So
okay.
from time to time,
That might confuse him, and
we do the
maybe
same.
she should stick with the Swedish.
We
eventually.
will see. My daughter has never. I've heard like other French people living in Sweden telling me that their kids were like mixing up languages. And with my daughter, that has never been an issue. She's always been very good at knowing, except for the like if she doesn't know a word or something like that. But otherwise, it has never been an issue. She's been very good at like knowing what language to use with whom. So I think it
I
will be fine.
I noticed with my oldest daughter, she was born here in Switzerland. Then when she was like 9 months old, we went to the US, and then she was at the daycare there. And we lived there for nearly 2 years. So I think she started to learn English there. And then we came back to Switzerland, and she went again to a French environment. So what did happened were is that she slowed down the learning of language, and then she need to have like the speaking therapy.
Yeah,
Like the first year of school, now she's perfectly fine. But
yeah,
like mixing all these languages on her mind, it slowed down her development in the
yeah,
beginning. So it's
yeah.
something that they catch up very quickly. So
I've
it's
heard that
not
it's quite
not an
common as
issue.
well. Yeah, I've heard that it's quite common that kids who live in a multi-language environment can have a little bit of a speech, how do you say, speech retard, or they can be a bit late on developing the language.
Feel like
Yeah, yeah. But I think it's nothing to worry about. I mean, it's
no,
just
no. Even me, when I didn't speak Portuguese very well until age of 3 or 4, so
yeah.
it's perfectly fine. So
But now you
maybe
speak,
that's some genes and not not a language issue. It just us trying to find the excuse.
yeah. Now you speak three languages though.
Yeah, I do. Not
Yeah.
the French is not the language that I speak the most, or with a better accent. But yeah,
No.
I'm quite fluent on the three languages, which is
Do
good.
you say do you see yourself going back to Portugal at some point?
I don't think so, especially right now because kids are at school and stay there, like to live here. We had an opportunity when we came back from the US to Europe. We had an opportunity to go back to Portugal, but we like living in Switzerland, so we decided to come here. So now I'm here to stay. So don't. And I was thinking maybe when I retire, but then when I retire, my kids are grown up and they have their own lives here. So it's not doesn't make sense. I'm not gonna have my my family anymore in Portugal back at
Yeah.
that time.
Hmm.
So it doesn't also make a lot of sense. But I like to go there and like to visit family and friends and spend some time there. But I think it's good.
What would you say is one thing that you learned from being a dad? Do you have something like that comes to mind when?
Yeah. One thing that I know is I was thinking a little bit about it, and I found it quite different than the pursue. That's what we have when we are grown-ups. When we are grown-ups, the perception of time is completely different than when we are kids. For example, when we like, if something happens and kids are sad, in 1 hour they're completely happy, and this completely switch. While for us, we can keep sad for weeks until we can leave it from our mind. While on the kids, this perception of time is completely different. That's was thinking about it, and this made me, and also the way we interact with them, it changes. If we take that into account, it changes how we interact also with them, because it doesn't make sense for us to keep angry with them for something that happened yesterday or even a few days ago, because they are not, for them is no longer an issue, right? At least that's what I've been noticing, especially recently, with my oldest daughter, and now I'm starting to get like try to make her understand the impact of these through her reactions on us, like longer time, but they don't get it immediately. So that's something that it's the perception of time and that they have is completely different than what we have as adults. I don't know
It's
if
so
you feel the same.
it's so interesting because at first I thought you were going in a completely different direction. I thought you would say just the perception of time in general, like how maybe we can feel like something is really long and they don't feel like that way, or we can feel like something is not that long and they can feel like
Mhm.
it's really long to wait. So I thought you were going in this direction. But I think the direction that you took of talking about forgiveness is a good one as well. And actually, I had the conversation with someone else in the previous episode, and we talked about the same topic. Like, what is one thing that you learned? And this is the thing that I said. I said I learned, like, I completely reassessed the way I'm holding grudges. I look at my daughter, and if something I say something, or if her little brother, right now he's learning how to interact with other kids. So if he steals like a toy from her or whatever, she forgives like this
Yeah.
instantly, and she means it. It's not just like saying the word. It's like, no, it's done.
Yeah.
And I think for us, it's very. I don't know exactly where it comes from. I can have a hard time forgiving when I feel like I've been wronged. I'm much better now than, let's say, 15 years ago, or even 10 years ago. But sometimes you feel like, oh, I've been wronged, and it's on your heart and it's on your mind, and it's very difficult for you to
Mhm.
turn the page. But I think
Yeah.
that, like, looking at my daughter, I think it's teaching me to at least be more deliberate about the grudges that I hold, and I don't do it that much. I don't. I'm not really staying mad at people for a long time, but I'm really blown away every time I see her forgiving someone just like this. And sometimes in the case of her little brother, the example I was giving, she's been wronged. Like, she's playing with something, he takes the toy from her. I mean, she's
Yeah.
entitled to feel a little bit annoyed in a way. And she is, but
True.
it lasts 2 seconds.
True. True. That feeling is very. I think we have to learn a lot from them on that. And sometimes make me think I'm sometimes too rigorous with them on that aspect, and not to learning with them. But you were touching the point of his forgiveness of, especially with the her young brother. What I feel with my youngest daughter is that she has a tendency to be the one that forgives the most, and sometimes she keeps it for a long time, and then sometimes her bucket is just full, so
Hmm.
she completely explodes and gets sad for a long time. Then it goes away, then it's empty again, so she can start feeling it again. So it's also should be careful when we have two siblings and one of them is always forgiving, that
Hmm.
it doesn't create a different feeling on them later on.
Yeah, I'm very attached to the. I think this is something. If I look at my own self and the way I've been improving over the past few years, I think that apologizing to people is something that I really learned how to do well. Sometimes I'm still missing the mark, but I think I'm very good at apologizing if I feel like I've done something that was not the right way to behave. Uh, we don't fight much with my wife, which is awesome. You know what they say, like, happy wife, happy life. I think it's true. But if I say something, let's say it's one morning and I got up the wrong side of the bed and the dishwasher hasn't been emptied, or she did something wrong with the dishwasher, or I did something wrong. I don't know. Like, I can be just lashing out, just like, but why is it like that? You know, not anything like weird, just like the regular day-to-day life.
Yeah, the normal routines.
Yeah, but I think I'm actually very good at just like apologizing 2 minutes later and say, I'm so sorry. This is not the right way to say it. And I think that my my kids, at least my daughter, because my son is a bit too young, but my daughter, she sees that as well. I think it's probably teaching her as well that saying I'm sorry is fine. And the same way as she's very good at forgiving, she's very good at apologizing as well. If she does something wrong, she's right away. She looks at me and she says, "Hey, I'm sorry." It's funny. In the beginning, she was saying, "Hey, I'm forgiving myself." I'm like, this is not exactly how it works, but it's good that you forgave yourself.
I have the same with especially my oldest daughter, because she has sometimes she has temper to really be mad and really be sad, and just in a sudden moment. Then after like 5, 10 minutes, because if you mentioned she's angry or she's something happened and she does not like, after 5, 10 minutes, it's over. And then she comes to us, sorry, I didn't react well, and
That's
so
good.
on. So it's really nice to have that. But and I thought, but if you know that, why did you do that like that? Why didn't you notice that during that time? But they have kind of a monster in their minds that they cannot take it out, and and now we understood. Now it just okay. Just give her some time. It will everything will
Calm
be
down.
fine at the end. Sometimes I just need to find some food and put in her mouth, and then she will be fine.
Yes.
It's insane.
I recognize this with myself. Like I tend to be, how do you say, hungry? Like when
Mhm.
you need to eat and it impacts your mood. Is it something like you feel like apologizing is something that she learned from watching you guys, or did you actually tell her that it's good to apologize, or do you feel like it's just something that developed by itself?
We tend to also when between them when someone has no doesn't have the right, we tend to tell them, yeah, just go to your sister and tell like apologize for what you've done, sorry,
Hmm.
and so on. I think it might come from us also, but not maybe not so explicitly, or we don't do that very explicitly. But they tend to. We are their role models, so we need to. They tend to mimic and to react based on what we do, for the good and for the bad. So I
It's so
think
interesting because
that's also.
the what we're talking about now, this idea of apologizing, it makes me feel like this is such an important skill that almost should be taught like at school, you know? Like we should spend so much time teaching people to apologize, even as adults. Um, I my when
Yeah.
my best friend got married, I was the godfather of the wedding. So they are Armenian, so they had like an Armenian wedding. So there was someone that was the godfather of the union, and I wrote in there, they had a book like a guest book, and I wrote something. I forgot exactly what it was, but one thing I wrote is my advice for you as a married couple: you should try to always seek to be the first one to apologize. And I think this is such a good. I'm not always like I'm not perfect. I'm not always doing it, but this is such a good rule to live by. Like even in friendship, I think it's not. I often say that like most fights are not worth fighting, especially with your friends. Like something happens, someone says something, and then you just like end up fighting with your friends.
And
Where it's
sometimes it's only misunderstood understandings each other.
very, very often, for sure. Or something completely external to the relationship impacting one person. Like one person might feel like hungry, or one person might
Mhm.
feel like something else happened at work and they are just like, in a state of confusion. Sometimes you pick a fight with people that you don't want to pick fight with. But as a couple and as a family and as a community and as human beings, I think that always trying to be the first to apologize, even if you feel like you were not wrong, is such a good hack, if I can call it this way. And it makes it easier for everybody. And very often, if you apologize, even though you're not completely sure that you were like the one that should be apologizing, very often the other person will apologize as well, realizing that like, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm thinking about this book that my daughter loves reading right now. It's called La Dispute, which means the fight, and it's a story with two friends who end up fighting for some shiny object that they found, and they both go to apologize to each other almost at the same time, and they say, "I'm sorry that I did that I did this," and the other character says almost at the same time, "No, I am sorry that I did this." And my daughter asked me the first few times, she was like, "Why are they both like apologizing?" And I told her because they value their friendship over what happened. And apologizing is a way to say I value our friendship over whatever like caused us to fight. So I think for a
And
married couple, it's a good idea to think
it is,
and
but
seek to be.
Do you feel that it's the for you it's as easy to apologize with your wife and or your external friendships or at work and with your colleagues?
It's easier to apologize to my wife than it is to friends, I would say. Um, because probably I'm the closest to my wife as well. Like she's my best friend, and she's like she has become the foundation of everything and of my
Yeah,
life. So, but with my friends, I think I'm quite decent at doing it as well.
yeah,
I'm not really the kind that picks fights. I used to be, but I don't think I'm really that kind anymore. I prefer when things are harmonious, and which is a little bit it's a little bit of a paradox, because I also, when I feel close to people, I tend to want to push boundaries in the sense that I want to try ideas. Like if I feel like there's trust between us, I'm gonna try things with you, like try ideas, and like sometimes even say things that I'm not completely convinced of, just to try them on for size.
yeah.
And that can cause the other person, even if they know me a little bit, or if they know me well, it can cause the person to be like, okay, I'm not agreeing with this, and like. So that from time to time can cause a little bit of tension, but I'm not trying to. I'm usually trying to avoid fights, because I think that they bring nothing.
Yeah,
If
sure.
if someone is like if someone has wronged you deliberately on purpose, then like you're not going to be able to change their mind. Like they have to make this decision by themselves in a way. So then you have to think about, like, do I value the relationship with this person more than being right and being the one who wins the argument? So yeah, with kids, I think this is something that I really want to try to teach my kids as well. It's like, if you value your relationship with someone, winning doesn't matter, because if you win the argument, you will lose something else. And that's something that is difficult, counterintuitive, difficult to apply, difficult to find out. But once you know it, then you should not walk away from it. You should live by this rule, that is, always look at the relationship, and if you value the relationship, not try to be winning the argument, because if you win the argument, you lose something. So
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I'm not
Sometimes it's
exactly sure.
hard because you have the ego. Sometimes it's really hard. And I feel that because I have a much closer relationship with my wife and much more comfortable in that sense, that sometimes I don't take that, I'm not thinking too much my behavior, and then I fall into that trap
Hmm.
of not thinking too much when behaving. Let's say like that. It's
Mhm.
nothing dangerous, but like small things, like you're saying, and just being picky of things that because it's the first thing that goes to my mind instead of thinking twice before saying something. So that's why I was asking. Sometimes it's easier for me, or it's harder for me at home than outside, because with outside I'm always more trying to think more deeply before doing something, while at my at home I'm more freely sharing that, which sometimes it's not that good. And the same with the kids, because I noticed already a few times being angry with my kid for some reaction, and then again because of this perception of time, or mis mis mismatch between the perception of time between me and my kids, I keep this feeling longer than what I should, because it's over for them. So it's really a work that I need to fight with myself.
That's a good place to wrap up. Thank you very much for this conversation. It was awesome.
Thanks, Greg, for having me.
We should do it
Really
again.
nice to see the Papa Notes
Yeah.
growing.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you, Greg.